Hello, everyone. I think we're still waiting for all of our speakers to get here, but just in the meantime, my name is Tan. Thank you for joining us for the latest Kumi Now online gathering. So our topic today is on student movements, and we are pleased to be joined by three activists who will be speaking about their particular contexts. The first part of our meeting is dedicated to our guest speakers, but do please stay around after they leave, as we will dedicate the rest of the hour to turning our knowledge advocacy for Palestine. This session is and it will be shared after the event. So please make sure your mic is off, and please take this into consideration if you have an opportunity to speak during the webinar. That said, we will be collecting questions for the Q&A portion via chat. So if at any point you have a question for our speakers, please ask it here. And just making sure, Ellis, you know if Andre is in the room yet? Okay. I think Francesca is here. Maybe Aiden, who's from IU, is also, okay, I see you. So I can introduce Aiden and Francesca first, and then Ellis, who's also co-hosting the session, the first part of the session with me, can introduce Andre when he gets here. Is that good? Okay. So Francesca, I guess we can start. We have actually two students from the state of Indiana. So Francesca is coming from Notre Dame. Francesca is an organizer with Occupation Free Notre Dame, and she's currently a PhD student in Peace Studies and History with the Kroc Institute and a Gender Studies minor at Notre Dame. Prior to that, Francesca obtained an MA in Holocaust and Genocide Studies from the University of Amsterdam and a BA in Anthropology and Comparative Race and Ethnic Studies from the University of Chicago. On top of her research in genocide studies and peace studies, she also has experience supporting low-income international students applying to college and is currently working with the Gazan Student Support Network to help students in Gaza study at schools outside of Gaza. And at the Kroc Institute, she's currently studying how the legacies of the Holocaust shaped American Jewish Zionist identity following the founding of Israel. So, I think I also graduated from Notre Dame, so I think Francesca will have a lot to say about the Catholic context at Notre Dame in particular. For Indiana University, we're being joined today by Aiden, and Aiden is a Palestinian and lead organizer of IU Divest Coalition and Palestine Solidarity Committee at Indiana University. And I think out of all campuses in Indiana, IU has been met in the last month with the most state violence. So hopefully he'll be able to talk about what's currently happening at IU as well. And Ellis, I don't know if Andre is here yet. Do you know? Okay.
Hey, sorry, should I go ahead? Cool.
Yeah, I think that would be great. You can go, and then once Andre joins, we can introduce him.
Cool, sounds good. Awesome. So hi, everybody. As Ton said, my name is Francesca, and I'm a PhD student in Peace Studies and History at the University of Notre Dame. I'm really grateful to be here in solidarity with all of you, as well as the student activists we are working with across the country to call on our universities to divest from genocide and apartheid in Israel and Palestine, and to draw national attention to the genocide in Gaza. So I'll start by talking a little bit about sort of the unique context that we're dealing with at Notre Dame, and then I'll talk about our protests and sort of what the fallout has been from our protests. So Notre Dame is like a really weird, interesting place. So obviously it's a very Catholic university and sort of actively Catholic, so you definitely feel that on campus, but it's also a pretty conservative place, both obviously like among the board of trustees and the administration, but also sort of in the student body. There's sort of a very apolitical bent to the community at Notre Dame that makes organizing particularly difficult. However, sort of within that context, I think a lot of us were pretty shocked when Father Jenkins in February did call for a ceasefire and to sort of peaceful dialogue between Israelis and Palestinians. And Father Jenkins is the president of Notre Dame, outgoing president of Notre Dame. And this statement was sort of received with mixed results. It was many months into the genocide, and a lot of people were very skeptical of it. But it was also a pretty significant step among American universities. So very few presidents of American universities have actually called for a ceasefire. And so it sets us up for a really sort of interesting dynamic of calling on the university both to sort of commit to its Catholic values, but also to live out the calls in Father Jenkins' statement. The other thing I really want to emphasize is like, again, that it's like a really apolitical space on campus. And there is a lot of fear built into resistance and protests on campus. So we have something that's sort of colloquially referred to as the 15-minute protest rule, which says that all protests must be approved by the administration and cannot last more than 15 minutes. The administration claims that this rule does not exist. They say that it was implemented during the Vietnam War by Father Hesburgh, who was the president at the time, was used to suspend 5 students and to expel another 5 students, and has never been enacted. And then when Reagan sort of praised the university for this rule, Father Hesburgh kind of rolled it back and was like, maybe I don't want to align myself with Reagan. What I would say is that whether or not that's true, and I have not been able to find any documentation that says that that's true, but like, and as a historian, I'm like pretty good at finding that stuff. But I have not been able to find anything that says that it was rolled back. But I think what's like most important about this is that regardless of whether or not the rule like officially exists, it creates the significant culture of fear in which people do not want to do protests on campus and basically don't do unapproved protests on campus. And also that like the Notre Dame Police Department and any other sort of administrators on campus can basically say that anything that we do is not allowed because what we are doing is against university policy. And this has meant that like many things we do, from building like a tent to putting up a canopy to protecting us from the rain and everything in between, is within that are well within university policies, are said to not be allowed, and items are confiscated, and we sort of face force and violence from the Notre Dame Police Department. And then I think like the other thing for context for us that's important is that we haven't really mobilized significantly in the past in sort of a targeted and strategic way around divestment on campus. And so we are both sort of amping up this call for divestment on campus in the past year without sort of having the baseline that some other universities have. And so that I think has posed some interesting challenges for like how we navigate escalating versus engaging with the administration. And then as Tan said, we have really been grounding our arguments in Catholics' values and in response to the progress we have made within the university through Father Jenkins's call for a ceasefire. And in particular, when Father Jenkins called for a ceasefire, he also called for dialogue with between Israelis and Palestinians. And so we have sort of taken that and said, you know, if you want dialogue, then why aren't you engaging in dialogue with students on this campus? And that's really been our major talking point for calling the administration to come to the table. And then we also pull from several different sort of Catholic social teaching, which I'm just going to read because I'm not Catholic and this is not super familiar to me. So I'm going to read some words from my incredible colleagues from the theology department. So we use encyclicals that unequivocally condemn, quote, any act of war aimed indiscriminately at the destruction of entire cities of extensive areas along with their populations as a crime against God and humanity, unquote. And also call on Pope Francis's 2020 encyclical Fratelli Tutti, which demands that our economy and our investments be oriented toward human rights, just peace, and development, rather than seeking maximum profit at the cost of the most marginalized human lives. And again, in our movement, we forefront Catholic demands of preferential option for the poor, solidarity with the oppressed, respect for life and human dignity and love. If I'm being honest, this has not gotten a lot of traction within the university. It's something that we are working on and we're definitely using to message, particularly with Holy Cross priests, to get their support as we engage with the administration. But there hasn't been sort of tangible engagement or progress on these points from the university. However, several Catholic media outlets have picked up on our protests. And Pax Christi, the National Catholic Peace Movement, published a statement of support, and there will also be a forthcoming article in US Catholic. So while it's not necessarily getting much attention at this point from within the university, there is a lot of pressure from outside the university for the university to be thinking about these Catholic values in their choices for investments and their complicity in the genocide. So it's sort of within that context and that messaging that we decided to do 2 protests in the past few weeks. So the first one was so it was during what we call Jenkins Fest, or sort of a celebration of the end of Father Jenkins's terms as president of the university. And this one we started with a sort of interfaith prayer service, and then moved to where this celebration was, and launched a protest. We built several tents that were pretty much immediately taken away. And then, but the university did sort of allow us to stay and maintain our protest into the evening, which we were not sure would happen. And then later in the evening, we built another tent, sort of symbolically, and stood with our arms linked in several sort of layers of people around it. And the Notre Dame Police Department engaged pretty aggressively and violently. They particularly targeted students of color. So they grabbed one student of color by the wrist and basically stood there saying, "It hurts, doesn't it?" over and over again. We have that on video, which is really disturbing. And then they also elbowed another student in the face. And they also have claimed, although not taken action against a student, that a student attacked a police officer and, quote, ripped out a large chunk of her hair. This isn't true. We have photo evidence of everything, and there's no proof of this, but they are using this to sort of hold over us, that they can do whatever they want to us. So after that first protest, it was a pretty big deal. This was one of the first unapproved protests that we had on campus in years. It just lasted that night, and we went home around 11. And there were no arrests or anything like that. We chose to disperse. After that, the faculty senate reached out to us and said that they wanted to establish a line of communication and enter into dialogue with us. And so we said, okay, great. This is where we want to get support across the university. We want to be engaging with faculty and with sort of systems of power within the university. So we'd be happy to do a meeting. They responded saying, since there haven't been any new protests, we don't need to talk to you. And we just wanted to establish a line of communication, but that's it. So we're not going to talk to you. This is obviously a completely walking back from their initial outreach, where they explicitly said that they wanted to enter into dialogue with us. After we got that initial we just want to establish contact, we're not going to talk to you, we pushed back and said, we want to meet with you. You wanted to meet with us, we want to meet with you. And they said no. And that was really the point when we decided to launch our second protest, which would have sort of been a longer term encampment if the university had let it. We did not so this was May 2nd on Thursday. We did not do almost anything that was against university policy other than gathering during reading period. So it was right before finals. We didn't build tents, we didn't chant, we didn't have signs. We really didn't do anything that was not allowed other than gathering on our university campus. As soon as the Notre Dame Police Department did not know that we were coming, which was a really big win on our side of keeping it secret. But once they did know that they were coming, again, we were literally just sitting on a lawn on campus, and we had like several unlabeled police cars watching us, as well as several labeled police cars like driving in circles around the lawn that we were on, just watching us like sit there and talk and hang out with each other. We received word early on that a faculty member had reached out to a dean of the Keough Schools of Global Affairs and was trying to get him to come. And so we were trying to wait until he came to engage in conversation with him. And with the idea that like he doesn't really have any power, but that he has a lot of potential to engage with other members of the administration and to encourage them to engage with us. Throughout the night, it was sort of a problematic dynamic for us because the Notre Dame Police Department basically set it up so that they were going to let us stay until 10, and they basically were gonna, as long as we weren't chanting and as long as we weren't putting up tents, they were gonna let us do whatever we wanted. So as long as it was sort of a gathering and not a protest, they would let us stay until 10 p.m., at which point they would arrest anybody who was there. So it sort of set up this problematic space where we sort of just were like sitting there because they weren't really going to do anything until we reached 10 p.m., at which point they would sort of completely shut it down. And so in about I guess maybe around like 8:30, we moved from sort of a lawn that was on the edges of campus towards the center of campus in front of the sort of infamous dome, golden dome that we have on campus. And at that point, the police department came and said, this is more of a disruption, even though we were literally just standing there, and that they would basically kick us out within 30 minutes. At about that 30-minute mark, we got word that that Dean Appleby, the dean of Keough School, and the provost were going to come and talk to us. And so faculty went and negotiated with the police department to let us stay until this conversation happened. But when this conversation, like when they arrived, there was like downpour rain. It was like awful. We tried to get them to go inside and they basically refused. And I think that at that point, we sort of knew that they weren't really going to engage in conversation with us in any meaningful way. And during this conversation, they were very dismissive. They basically said that everything we were trying to do was complicated and would not be possible. And that this was sort of not the right way to make change on campus. They also made sort of racist comments and were very dismissive and really problematic throughout the conversation. We presented our demands. Again, each one, they said, this is complicated and you have no idea what you're talking about, even though we do. And they did not engage substantively in any way. By the end of the conversation, we asked them if they would commit to another meeting to us, and they would not do this. So they sort of said, sure, but then when we said, okay, but we need a yes, and it needs to be in the next month, and they refused to commit to that. And that is the point when the arrests began. During the arrest, or like just before the arrest, we were notified for the first time that they were going to arrest anybody who was on the quad. So not just people who were part of the action, but also anybody filming. And this was a really clear indication that they were trying to make sure that there were minimal to no witnesses to the arrests. Several of us did stay and filmed the arrest, so we have footage of pretty much everything that happened, but they sort of aimed to try to minimize that. The arrests, while not as bad as on other campuses, were quite violent. They pinned people down to the floor, or like to the ground, got on top of students, dragged students away on tarps, and other sort of really unnecessarily aggressive actions that I think particularly targeted students of color. And also my working theory is that they also targeted the students who are sort of liaising with the police department the whole night. They also arrested the one person who was arrested for filming was a Black woman, and the officer who arrested her walked past two white people who were filming to arrest the Black woman who was filming. Just very briefly, so that was that night. They dropped the resisting arrest charges for 3 of the students, but they have maintained the charges of trespassing for 17 students who were arrested that night, including the Black woman who was arrested while filming. Father Jenkins, a couple weeks after the protest, released a highly problematic statement in which he praised both the administrators and the Notre Dame Police Department for their professionalism and discretion, and maintained that they would both maintain the charges and that they would force students through the sort of internal disciplinary process. Which is like, I mean, it's problematic. So I think something like, it's on the one hand, it's like not as bad as what other universities are having, but on the other hand, like most universities actually are not arresting their students, or at least a lot of schools aren't arresting their students, and especially not for like the level of protests that we were doing. So like while it is not as bad as what a lot of universities are facing, it is sort of, given the level of our protest, is sort of particularly punitive. Just a very quick note on sort of our steps forward. So after this protest, we've received a significant surge in support from faculty, particularly in the Peace Studies Institute, the Kroc Institute, and the Keough School more broadly. And the Kroc Institute, leadership within the Kroc Institute are really pushing the administration to engage into conversation with us, and faculty who are sort of mediators and specialize in mediation have offered to both support us and help us develop our case for the university, while also actually serving as a mediator if any conversations do come about, which is sort of significant movement and engagement compared to what we have ever had before. So we don't know if those meetings will happen. We don't know at this moment if, even if the meetings do happen, it is going to be a long road towards any change, but we are ready and willing to fight it. So just to very quickly wrap up, sorry, this is a long speech. But to very quickly wrap up, I want to sort of just hold space for a bunch of different things. So the first thing is that what we have seen at the University of Notre Dame has been, like, honestly pretty traumatic for the students who experienced it. Particularly the targeting of students of color has been particularly disturbing, and the violence from the Notre Dame Police Department has been really challenging for both people within the movement and outside of the movement. What we have faced, as I mentioned, is nowhere near as bad as what sort of our colleagues at other campuses have experienced, in which, you know, the police departments have responded with significantly more brutality and targeted actions against students. And of course, none of that compares to the experiences of Palestinians in Gaza currently facing an Israeli committed and US supported genocide. And so as we continue in our advocacy, we are sort of trying to hold all of these things true while making meaningful change for Palestinians on the ground.
Thank you, Francesca. And we'll have a Q&A after, where, you know, if you want to put questions already in the chat, we'll revisit them. I think Andre's here, but for now, Aiden, if you want to go next and introduce yourself and talk about IU's context.
Yeah, thanks. So, I'm Aiden. Like I said, I'm a Palestinian student who's studying at IU. I live here in the United States, but I'm from northern occupied Palestine and spent some time in the occupied West Bank. Um, where do I be? I'm an undergrad student studying political science and philosophy. But I think I'll begin. This year I restarted our SJP chapter, so our Students for Justice in Palestine, but we go by a different name, Palestine Solidarity Committee. We're effectively a chapter. And so this year we really kind of got back into things and were pulled in, obviously, through the genocide. And so within the last few weeks, we've really mobilized at a level, you know, that we didn't necessarily expect. I mean, I know we all wanted to, but we didn't expect things to go the way they did, for better or worse. But so I think beginning like 2 or 3 weeks ago, in late April, we decided to set up an encampment in Dunn Meadow, which is a central like field within IU's campus. And we began, you know, unfortunately, we set up very quickly. But there's a policy, interestingly enough, about Dunn Meadow. It's considered like a free speech zone, or like a zone in which demonstrations are designated to. However, the night before our demonstration, an ad hoc committee was established in order to change that. Um, it was not made clear whatsoever. Nobody knew. The policy was still on the website, that contradicted the ad hoc committee. So we had set up the encampment, and within about an hour, IUPD, the police department on IU's campus, came to tell us we had to leave. And faculty who had been supportive of us, we have a Faculty for Justice in Palestine chapter here on IU, which is like phenomenal. Um, but they came out to support us, and really asserting the policy, but also asserting our demands first and foremost. And just to get in our demands, so we want the resignation of our president, which is a kind of tall order to ask, but I mean, it will make more sense as I go along. But just to preface, before the encampment, there was a no confidence vote in her, in which she was voted 93% no confidence from faculty and the grad student organization. So that was our first demand. Secondly, we demanded the end to the Crane partnership. IU is invested in the Naval Sea Warfare Center in Crane, Indiana, or just simply Crane. It's a naval base that involves sonar warfare, electronic warfare, specializes in small arms. We know it has distinct connections with Israeli defense companies in developing AI optic weaponry that's being used in Gaza right now. It's also a distributor of the Mark 84 2,000-pound bombs. And it's just an all-around, like, the more you peel, the more, disgusting it gets. And then we call third and foremost for full financial disclosure of IU and IU Foundation, a separate, it kind of splits. There's the departmental investments, and then there's the IU Foundation, or the larger investments. We full financial disclosure, and then from there, divestment to any company that is supporting, the ongoing genocide and settler colonialism in the land of Palestine. And so we began our encampment. I go back, and they told us to leave, and within 2 hours, Indiana State Police were down. They were armed to the brim, yeah, tear gas. Let me think. Tear gas. They had live ammunition. They had pepper bullets that they had used. They had riot gear. They had snipers. I don't know if that image had gone around, but there was a sniper on the top of our building. And then, a plethora of things. There was probably like 300 cops, maybe 50 on the line to raid the encampment. So the encampment got raided, and 33 people were arrested at that time. Mostly students, but around 5 faculty. And then from there, we had a kind of a quiet day. Friday, there was a lot of psychological warfare because we stayed through the night. There was a lot of surveillance. Police were around. State police would drive around, revving their engines. Another interesting thing that we have to deal with, which is more similarly akin to UCLA, is there's a very heavy Zionist population on IU's campus. So we received a lot of harassment. I jokingly say we kind of received what we call music terrorism, in which a lot of the Zionists brought a lot of speakers and would just play EDM for hours, like full volume. I think that was my biggest pet peeve. But there was also like verbal harassment, sexual obscenities being said, especially when we were getting brutalized by the police, because there was a place to stand, and there was the Zionists, and there was also the Proud Boys that came down, and I think that's emblematic enough. But I also would tell my colleagues that as a Palestinian, this feels very like oddly at home. Back in the West Bank, you'd be doing your own thing. Your friend's house gets raided. You have the IOF on you, and then there's a dance party down the street in the settlement or something like that. Very similar, or just the idea that you have to worry about the army coming in, and then you also have to worry about getting flanked by settlers or something. We didn't know what, some of these students were willing to do. We know some of my friends at UCLA obviously had seen in the news, had been attacked in a lot of things. But so Friday was a quiet day. Then comes Saturday, and Indiana State Police comes back down with even more. I think there were some like 50 or 60 SWAT. There were, again, live ammunition. They had a Bearcat, which was armed with a sound cannon. Again, the snipers just stayed there for like 3 days. We had just seen them the whole time. just a plethora of things. And so that's the day I got arrested. And we have evidence that this, they were targeted arrests, the sniper chatter. We had people listening to the sniper chatter, and we're able to like pinpoint the descriptions of me and some other top organizers that were targeted. So there was that. And then from there, I was arrested and then issued a ban from campus. So I'm not allowed on IU property for a year. Criminal trespassing. One of my colleagues, unfortunately got 5 years. They're also contingent on the charges. So there's 56 of us that are now facing charges of criminal trespassing, including 10 faculty members. But I mean, all in all, there is a shift in consciousness. We're still the encampment's still up, actually. The Indiana State Police realized that like their brute force coming out was not effective in really mustering anything, because although it was hard organizationally that they did a top sweep, they removed top organizers, that there's been a lot of chaos. Like the students here are very, very principled and are very, willing to act. And I think like there is the dichotomy. Like I honestly feel like sometimes, although the brute force is like definitely like jarring, I think I'm a little biased too by already experiencing it in the West Bank and stuff like that. But sometimes that's easier to deal with because it takes the mask off the university. Um, it takes the mask off just the blind violence, the blind structural violence, instead of, like the other half where at like Notre Dame, like targeted, like the hiding behind administrative bureaucracy. So, and I think there's like a split on that on all campuses. You look at Harvard. Harvard had the suspension route, threats of suspension, so on and so forth, these technicalities, whereas Columbia was raided with such force and so on and so forth. So it's really navigating those dynamics. In terms of moving forward, I think we're just moving forward. We learned so much from the university. We learned so much about the community, and we plan to, just essentially like assert the knife of our demands continually by just our presence, because we know the presence on our camp, like our presence as a Palestine org, as organizers for Palestine, is continually challenging the school in ways that it can't respond. President Whitten is such a, outward fascist that it doesn't matter. The faculty, it's like I said, it's like a bittersweet thing. It's really made it easy for the faculty to kind of side with us when President Whitten had a meeting after, 55 students were arrested by SWAT, and goes, I don't see an issue with what I did. It's really like again, it's the blind violence coming out. So again, like we're moving forward, and a lot of us, we have a decent amount of Palestinian students again who have family, back in Gaza, who are literally willing to do anything, who are willing to make any change. And I think there's been a joy in them and a joy in me too, the idea that we could muster a response from state police is really indicative of how much we're challenging our institution, how scared they are of us, how scared they are of students, how scared they are of it expanding, so um I try to think of I'm trying to think of more things off the top of my head that were really like big experiences. But no, I think that my goal is to continue because this school is a weapons manufacturer with a university attached. IU's invested in so many things that are just dirty money. Like I said, the Crane partnership. Crane developed C4ISR systems, the communication and reconnaissance systems that, although there isn't a distinct link we have found yet, but this is the same system that powers Lavender, the AI system that's used to target and level Gaza, the same system that was used to kill the poet Rafat al-Ari, the same systems that are being used to perpetuate genocide. And again, a part of our message is too that everything we're doing is for Gaza, everything like we're out for is. And it's emblematic though that, the imperial boomerang, that this is an investment on weapons manufacturing, not in students, not in actual, grounded values that purportedly the university espouses. But the idea that you can just invest yourself in, this capitalist greed, this weapons manufacturing, and it's not going to come back. That it's not, you won't make yourself expendable, you won't become thereby expendable at some point. You know what I mean? The idea that there will exist an expendable people that, for the sake of weapons profit is I think the saying, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and that's like the exact thing that we're witnessing. So yeah, I'll wrap up there.
Thank you, Aiden, for sharing, and solidarity to you as you continue to do your work. Ellis, you want to introduce Andre for our last speaker?
Yes, so our last speaker is a student from Yale, the Reverend Andre Guilford Jr. Rev. Andre is an organizer, educator, creative, and innovator in tackling social problems facing Black young people using education and faith. Ordained to Christian ministry at Mount Pleasant Missionary Baptist Church, Andre attended Morehouse College, graduated from Wayne State University with a Bachelor of Arts degree in History and African American Studies. He also received a Master of Arts in Teaching from the University of the District of Columbia. And just this past weekend, Andre graduated with his Master of Divinity degree in Practical Theology at Andover Newton Seminary at Yale Divinity School in New Haven, Connecticut, and concluded his tenure as the president of Yale Black Seminarians. In March of this year, Andre was called to serve as the interim pastor of the historic Dixwell Avenue United Church of Christ, a 2004-year-old congregation in New Haven, Connecticut. Andre, thank you so much for joining us to talk about your context of the student movement and protests at Yale University, Yale Divinity School, and New Haven this past year.
Thank you so much, Elise. I am very grateful to be among you all today. I was just over here just saying amen, 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 ashe, as Aiden was talking, because all of that is very similar to what is happening here at Yale. I'm going to speak from a little bit of a different perspective because as a Black man, Black queer man who also is clergy, who has been kind of radicalized in the movement for Black lives, I come to this moment a little bit different, yet of the same thread, right? Of the same fabric. In the midst of all of this is happening, right? I've been very familiar with what's been going on in Palestine, which has been going on for a very long time. It's been going on since I got involved in the movement for Black Lives, which was back in 2015. Actually more like 2013. I believe that was the murder of Trayvon Martin at the hands of a vigilante who took his life. Then there was many others, too many to name: Sandra Bland, Mike Brown, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery. I mean, this is Rakisha McBride. All these people, right, murdered by the hands of police or murdered by vigilantes, and these are all Black people. But we understood then that there was significant correlations between the Palestinian plight and Black people here in America. And unfortunately, too often, the narrative has been situated to divide. And we see that now, right? We see that in real time happening, where Black people are not either aware or are not fully, the correlations are not made clear that this is the same kind of evil, right? The same evil that is segregating and ghettoizing Palestinian people and creating systems to oppress them and to subjugate them and to surveil them and to create food deserts and deserts of poverty, and deserts of wealth, taking away their land, a settler colonial state in the Palestinian land by the state of Israel. This is the same kind of thing that is happening here in New Haven, right? Where New Haven used to be a bastion of Black ownership. Now New Haven is majority renters. New Haven used to have a significant amount of Black wealth. That is no longer the case, right? Yale has taken up a lot of space, does not pay taxes to New Haven. And as a result, Yale has honestly have created, has exacerbated the wealth gap here in New Haven. So that, all these things come to a head when you think about what is happening with the colonial project that is happening in Palestine, and how students are responding to that here at Yale University. All these things are at play in real time, and it doesn't help when we've had our own encampments here. All power to the undergraduate students. Again, I'm a graduate professional student, but I must give credit to the undergraduate students, the Palestinian students, the Muslim students, queer folks, Black queer women who were leading the helm here at Yale, and setting up these encampments. There were two that were both destroyed by the Yale police. The second one, which was essentially those who were in the encampments were told to leave, and there was a whole guard of both Yale police and also New Haven police. And I believe there was a mixture of other surrounding police forces that came and essentially blocked off the encampment while they took up the tents and the library, the people's library that was there, the food, the snacks, the artwork that had been created, took all that up and, put it into a warehouse where people had to sign up to get their materials back. So this is happening in very real time. So as a result of that encampment, getting back to this correlation, right? The students decided to get together and to protest, starting outside of President Salave's house, and then move to the campus. It was somewhere along in that route where the police met the protesters, and honestly, using excessive force, arrested several, one by which was a community member who was arrested violently by our chief of police, who happens to be a Black man and who happens to also be a faculty member at the Divinity School. So it posed a significant complex for us here, that this person who happens to be Black, who also happens to be a faculty member, and who happens also to be a minister, violently put his knee on the back, allegedly puts his knee on the back of this person who's a community member, and arrest him, and as you were protesting peacefully. There was some swearing that took place, right? But that does not negate the fact that you use excessive force to arrest this community member. So these are the things that are at play here at Yale, because all these things put me and my colleagues in a very significant quandary, because you have this, we have a Black person who is operating on the behalf of the police, right? And who are contributing to the exacerbation of this subjugation of protesters who are peaceful. And overall, I must say that the university's response has been one of silencing. It has been more of silencing than actually conversation. It's been more of silencing than collaboration. It's been more of silencing, saying that you are not being civil, than actually engaging the protesters in real ways, trying to figure out how to, what are the demands, right? The President Salave sent out an email saying that the protesters in the encampment were doing a litmus test in the encampment to anyone who passes their political beliefs would be accepted into the encampment, even though that was not the case, because I came in and brought them water and they didn't ask me any questions except for hello. So these are all the things that are happening. It's more so a systemic effort to silence, to demonize, and all the protesters, all of the student protesters that have been working adamantly, they've all been doing is trying to bring to the head the discrepancies that are present here in New Haven. New Haven is a predominantly Black city with systemic wealth gaps that has been exacerbated by Yale. And the efforts to disclose the investments by Yale and to divest those investments, to then move those investments to New Haven, to make New Haven a better place for the people that live here, is the call of the protesters. It's the call of the student protesters. It's very simple. But again, as Aiden mentioned so brilliantly, why is this such a threat? Is a moral call saying that you are contributing to death. You are contributing to genocide. You are contributing to the violent murder of a whole people. Those who have not been murdered are on the brink of famine, right? And for me as a minister, this has been a significant moral issue that I could not help but to collaborate with the student protesters, collaborate all of us together to try to figure out and push this university to divest and to reinvest. Because it's not just about disclosing and then divesting. It's about you need to put your money where you are located, because that has not been done holistically and robustly. So I can go on and on, but this is for me, it's a moral issue that is complex, interdependent amongst all these communities, and I find significant solidarity with my Palestinian brothers and sisters and family and siblings with the liberation of Black people and all other peoples of color.
Yeah, this is great. I feel like one of the things I noticed in this conversation is that there's so many different contexts in different campuses and where you guys are located, but there's so many similarities. So I guess now in transitioning, I don't think we have a lot of time for our action session today, so we'll probably do that near the very end, but I do want to leave some space for questions, so Ellis and I will be running that. So if you guys have questions, please put it in the chat. Ellis, if you have questions, or if even the speakers want to respond to each other, feel free to do so.
Could I just respond quick?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I just wanted to, go off the back of some of what Andre said, but that this student movement has really like opened my eyes, that like I knew effectively the Black struggle in the United States, the Palestinian struggle, the struggle in Haiti, the struggle in in Iraq, like all these countries that have been touched by American imperialism, American colonialism, and just largely oppression in the vague sense, are like really witnessing that connection, because this movement, when I say like we're really standing on the shoulders of our predecessors, whether that be the 2020 uprisings, whether that be the Vietnam protest, whether that be, South African apartheid divestment movement, that like learning all these little things, learning what people took from 2020 and are sharing with us now so that we can move forward. Because this is like, in large part, that Palestine is just the vanguard of the larger anti-imperial struggle. It's the lineated salient point right now that, people are confronting this, the empire at its peak, at its most violent, at its again, like I said, at our school, the mask off, but that's really where the mask is off. That, the bombs in Gaza don't distinguish between, a combatant, a civilian. Like the idea that there is distinguishment, no, it's really just this pure genocidal violence, and this is like where the struggle is delineated. This is where it's salient, and this is what we have to we're organizing against. The idea that we believe in a world that is better than that. That it takes a world, that we can have a world that's better than that, one that's not restricted to just like capitalist greed, weapons manufacturing, and just murdering of children and anyone anywhere. So I just I wanted to say that connection.
And may I also add, I must just say that I think in the conversations around what is happening, right, it's less about, even though I have my political beliefs, right, and they're all aligned, right? These are people. Like it's just very simple. It's actually people, and we are all experiencing the same kind of violence, just in different ways, right? I'm from Detroit, so a few miles north, there was the violence of a unclean water system that poisoned an entire city, right? And many families are still reeling back from that issue, right? Detroit went through I mean, it's a ton of stuff that happened in Detroit, right? Bankruptcy, foreclosures where families were actually kicked out of their homes unjustly because of exacerbated tax appraisals, miscalculated tax appraisals, right? Where families were actually kicked out of their homes. Like, so this is happening all over the country, all over the world. And unfortunately, this is being touted as just a Palestinian issue, right? Just in Gaza, right? It's not. The violence is continual. It's happening all over the world. Apartheid was the same kind of thing. Jim Crow was the same kind of thing. Unclean water, same kind of thing. Lack of food, same kind of thing. I mean, like so this is this danger, right, to the state, to those in power, because when we finally realize that we are fighting the same enemy, what would happen, right? And this is what we see with the student movement. There's people from all over the world, all different kind of backgrounds, Jews, Muslims, Christians, atheists, agnostics, who are saying this is wrong. And they're all bonding together on one accord. And that is the threat. That's the major threat that is at play here.
Yeah, and I think actually in this room alone, I think Francesca, you come from an American Jewish background, and Andre, you're a Christian. I don't know, Aiden, your faith background. But in terms of this multi-faith and kind of this movement, but then also Aiden kind of mentioned this historical kind of building up to this moment as well. So I think that's really interesting. And there's a lot of questions going into the chat right now. So I'll pick a few, but I guess Judith is saying, how can we turn our policymakers to put the good of everyone at the forefront of their decisions? And then I think there was an earlier one about, looking forward towards the summer recess months and, into next semester, what the hopes you guys have are.
I can start. So yeah, I mean, putting pressure on elected officials, yeah, I mean, you have to put it in terms of money. I don't there's no real other, you have to speak their language, and what the language that they're speaking is money. I know that's really a pessimistic view of the situation, but I mean, like there is no popular support for this genocide, and yet Biden said sends $1 billion worth of weapons to Israel to continue committing the genocide. So I don't personally have a lot of hope in the political systems, and I don't think there are clear-cut strategies for how to engage them. I do think the more I mean, I think we can use sort of apartheid South Africa as a model for thinking about the future, and using lessons learned from apartheid South Africa to place pressure on the administration. But even then, it's not obviously a direct roadmap, and I find it very difficult to conceptualize how we're going to change politicians' minds on these stances, especially with in the face of Christian Zionism. I think is where they're getting the most pressure, that it's not even really Jewish Zionism, and that there are far more Christian Zionists than Jewish Zionists in the US. In terms of the summer, so one is that we are following the lines of any chances of communication with the administration. So we really have no idea what's going to happen with this. We know that the administration is getting a lot of pressure from very high up places within the university, within the university, to meet with students. So we are preparing for that and hoping that it will happen, but with knowledge that there's a really good chance that it does not happen. And of course, that even if they meet with us, that they don't do anything, and which I think is the most likely outcome, honestly. But we are sort of preparing for that. We are also expanding our demands. So our initial 3 demands, which I neglected to mention, are disclosure and divestment, an academic boycott, and then strengthening freedom of speech and protests on campus. And so we are also expanding those to include sort of various other demands to support and uplift Palestinian students and scholars as well. But I think the other thing that we're doing is really trying to organize ourselves on campus. So the movement for Palestine was about 5 students 2 months ago, on campus was about 5 students 2 months ago, and now is about 30 to 40 committed students. And so we're really trying to figure out how to put some structure and decision-making processes and various other things on the movement that we have on campus. We are also trying to build allies across the university. So we are certainly getting a lot of support from the Peace Studies Institute, but we're also trying to think really strategically about building relationships with other Holy Cross priests on campus, because every president of the university has to be a Holy Cross priest, and they have a lot of sway on campus. And we know that our incoming president will be much more receptive to engaging with us if we can mobilize Holy Cross priests to support us. So that's also one of our strategies for the summer.
Yeah, I guess I can go next. Yeah, so I think our job, right now we're kind of in a regrouping period, because we know summer it's kind of difficult, you know what I mean? Student movement, and then summer hits, the students aren't there. But so we're just trying to regroup to kind of, launch again in the fall. And the idea is to I think, Francesca, you really kind of hit the nail in the what is a nail in the coffin, or something like that was really on point. South Africa is a great model. It's great to learn, but this is a particularly difficult, thing that we're facing. A particularly I don't think, of course the US had connections to South Africa, but the way in which it does to Israel are very unique. But I'd also push back on the idea that a lot of Americans frame it that this small little country determines what, or this settler colonial state determines what goes on in the US. That's not the relationship at hand. It's the front that this country is using. Everything that happens is, effectively in American interest. That's why it can continue. That the things we're seeing have happened in other places, where the US has been, the Iraq War, 1 million Iraqis were killed, an occupation went there, in South America riddled through. So it's important to remember how we organize. that are thinking about this, because it's what everything starts here. And so we have a particular responsibility here, you know, we have a particular complicity here, and also a particular challenge, because the United States is like effectively like, you know, I make my political speculations, dying superpower of the world, but still the superpower of the world. Um, but what, you know, organizing has taught me, especially on the university campus, but the way that in which we really get our demands, because you can't ask the hand to move in a lot of cases. Like there are spaces like, and I don't mean that, but it's like you have to do something in which it forces the hand. You know, and so our job and our strategic goal on campus is producing enough like internal chaos, and internal chaos can mean a billion different things. You know, internal chaos can be a scandal, internal chaos can be this constant disruption, internal chaos can be a boycott, internal chaos can be a strike. Enough chaos that's consistently, that builds off of it, that continually moves. Like say, you know, I think what's beautiful, it's beautiful what's happening at the UC system. Like you witness the students, I don't say like the students getting brutalized is beautiful, but the students who came out full force, and then, you know, the grad union at UC, 17,000 grad workers were like, yeah, we're striking. You know, and that really figuring out who is in this fight with you. I have so much more faith in faculty, even though like, you know, I have my qualms with faculty. I've always had qualms with faculty just going to school, but like now it's like realizing that who is in this, you know, it's students, it's faculty, it's the community members. It's not the administrators are not here, but also expanding there, that it's your neighbors, it's your friends, it's your community, you know, it's the people. And realizing that, making those coalitions, making that alliance, so you can all cause that chaos, because our job, you know, is making, you know, is making supporting Israel, sending all that money, you know, supporting weapons manufacturing is unfeasible, you know, making it so difficult. And I think like a good like analogy is like, say you have a janitor who works for some weapons manufacturing company. If he's constantly getting bugged by students, you think he's gonna wanna, he gets a $40,000 salary a year. You think he's getting constantly yelled at for his associations with weapons manufacturing. You think he's gonna wanna continue? But it's about finding those weak links. It's about finding ways you can really push. And that those weak links will bring it all down. You know, and it's like it's effectively a large endeavor, that the student movement is a focal point, and that hopefully it can spread larger to communities. And that's what happened in Palestine. You know, there's Palestinian armed resistance, but that's not, you know, resistance in Palestine has always existed in a multitude of ways. You know, that in 1936 there were organized huge strikes against the British. You know, there was also, you know, armed struggle component, but all of them together were what, you know, effectively caused chaos. Granted, that revolt did ended poorly, but you know, the idea that Palestinians have always found ways to resist, that whether it be boycott, whether it be, you know, um, BDS, whether it be, you know, the Intifada, like all of these things, you know, and we have a responsibility to resist the things that are on us, because we are in, you know, the belly of the beast. We're in the thing, you know, we are, you know, we're all varying degrees of victims, but effectively, you know, everyone at some point will be a victim of this system, will be a victim of this violence. And it's our job to orient ourselves in that kind of thinking.
And thanks, Aiden, for those powerful words. I think we're running short on time, but I think, you know, I think you hit the nail in the coffin, in the head, in terms of students being at the forefront of creating, you know, new society and what, you know, a better world could look like. So we appreciate you guys for coming. I think Andre might have disappeared. Lily, is there anything you want to say about actions? Our speakers also, if you guys have any specific actions, Francesca sent me a link at some point, but Aiden, if you have anything that you want to particularly say about how we can support the movements that you guys are organizing and doing on campuses.
I just think quickly, like, because we don't have a lot now, we're just kind of bogged down in lawfare, which is hard because it's like a lot of things are behind the scene. But I keep telling my organizers this, that like what's so important is your like participation, yes, but also your readiness to participate. that you're constantly ready and like aware of like when things are coming, because like that's the nature of movements. That's the nature of struggle, that it goes do, but it's like the real like revolutionaries, the real people who stay, the people who make change are the ones who can like go up but also navigate the lows. That's the focal, that's the point. And so I think like in that learning from that too, like it's about people being ready. So I'd say just like there's students everywhere. There's ways everywhere. You can boycott, you can join that Starbucks boycott, the McDonald's boycott, you can block celebrities on social media. There's ways to do your part no matter where, just reading a book about Palestine, just reading a book about the US's participation in Palestine, just all of those things. So that's my general spiel, and I hope that helps.
I'll just say one quick note and a final thank you to each of our 3 speakers and panelists who were able to join us. We here at Sabeel and Kumi support you in the movements, and our Palestinian colleagues from East Jerusalem are very grateful that you were able to join us today. I've put all the links to the social media accounts for the movements at each of the respective universities in the chat. So I encourage those of you with social media to, as part of this week's action, follow those accounts, and the rest of the information specifically for the Notre Dame action, and then also the usual actions of the week, are linked on the website, and that is shared in the chat. We're not going to take any more of your times today to go through the actions like usual. But again, just thank you to our speakers for this discussion, and did want to give Andre one more chance to answer the last question, but I don't see him. So with that being said, we're going to wrap it up, and thank you, Ellis and Ton and Francesca, Aiden, and Andre.
Thank you guys so much.